In this lesson, we will talk about project planning and why plan projects. How do we plan projects? What is a good project plan? And what are some specific planning pitfalls we should avoid? Projects involve the performance of work that is to some extent unique and whose execution is subject to risk. It therefore goes without saying that we should be well prepared before we embark upon the actual work. Professional project management relies on a series of tried and trusted planning processes and techniques that help us to draw up good project plans and thereby ensure we have a complete overview of the work to be done and the challenges we may encounter in the execution phase. Project planning is all about finding good answers to the following questions. Why? Why do we do the project? What should we do? When do we need to finish the work? How much will it cost? What if something happens? And who should perform the work? If the answers to these questions show that the project is still a good investment, we can move on to the execution phase. If the answers show that the project will not deliver the desired benefits, the project may be amended or even shelved. For small and simple projects, these questions may be quickly answered. However, for large, more complex projects, it will take time to gather and organize the necessary information. In the project planning phase, the project manager is responsible for the following tasks or activities. Ensuring that the project gets underway quickly and efficiently through an effective startup phase. And ensuring that the information underpinning the project, such as the business case, needs analysis, contracts, and tender information, are made available to the project and the project manager. And bringing the planning team together for a kickoff meeting in order to establish a shared understanding of the project's objectives and constraints, and to draw up a plan for the planning phase. Collecting, structuring, and clarifying needs, requirements, and constraints from users, clients, management, and other stakeholders. Using the lessons learned from previous projects, a lot of useful information can often be found here. Running creative processes to find simple and effective solutions, weigh alternatives, and choose those that best meet the business objectives and project objectives. Describing the contents of the projects, the products and services that we want it to result in a clear and concise way. Here, it is important that requirements for quality and functionality are well described. Going through the description of the project's scope of work with the most important stakeholders to ensure that all the requirements and needs are met. Updating the scope of work as necessary. Establishing a schedule that shows the logical sequence of activities or tasks, designating when they must be performed and with what resources in order to complete the project's scope of work. Establishing a cost estimate that reflects the costs of all the resources involved: personnel, material, equipment, machinery. And all estimates must be based on realistic assumptions relating to productivity, resource availability, volumes, rates and constraints, such as external decisions and necessary permits. Since considerable risk attaches to the planning of work to be done in the future, the project manager must identify the most important risks, the threats and opportunities, and assess how these may affect the scope of work, schedule, and cost estimate. It is generally necessary to include buffers in the schedule and cost estimates, called risk buffers, to allow for the fact that some risks will affect the project's objectives. Drawing up a project plan that includes project objectives, scope of work, schedule, resource plan, cost estimate, and the risk register. And then finally, updating the business case if the planning process has identified new benefits or if the time and cost estimates underpinning the original business case have been altered. So what is important when we plan projects? We need a project model containing a guide to project planning, best practice, which is a recipe for good planning. A capable project manager who is good of planning projects. A plan for the planning phase that sets out what needs to be done to produce a robust and realistic project plan, sometimes called a project execution plan. And a project team with the necessary capacity, knowledge, and skills. Experience from other similar projects. Sufficient time to produce a good project plan. Involvement of key stakeholders to ensure that the scope of work and quality requirements match expectations and do not exceed time and cost constraints. Focus on the business case and benefits. Remember that the project is a means for benefit realization. And what should we avoid when we plan projects? Lack of time. We don't have time to plan. We got to get started on the real work. We don't have time to plan, but we will probably have to make time to do the work over as a result of misunderstandings or poor performance. A planning phase with no structured guide, in which confusion reigns about what needs to be done. Lack of involvement by key stakeholders. Underestimating the complexity of the scope of work. Lack of clarity about and lack of agreement on the scope of work. Stakeholders with diverging expectations about the project. And then how can we create a good project plan if stakeholders don't agree on the requirements and constraints? The main results of the project planning phase is a shared understanding among all the most important stakeholders, such as clients, management, users, and the project team, about project benefits, contents, and constraints, and a project plan that contains the project objectives, the scope of work, the schedule, a resource plan for execution, the cost estimate, the risk analysis and the risk register, and finally, an updated business case that reflects any new information that comes to light during the planning process.